Okay, roll call.
We just have to open the meeting first, have to announce what the meeting is.
Announcing the meeting is beginning.
This is the Committee to Assess and Recommend Strategies for Housing Creation within the town. This meeting is being recorded and will be rebroadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The chair must inquire whether anyone is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make your presence known. This meeting will be replayed via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition 1072. It may also be accessed via Government Access Channel Live Video on Demand archives on the Town of Barnstable's webpage. Committee members, Councilor Paula Schnapp.
Here.
Betty Luckey. Councilor Luckey,
Here.
excuse me.
Here.
Councilor Charlie Bloom. Councilor John Crow.
Here.
Councilor Gordon Starr.
Here.
Mary Ann Barboza. Here. Hilda Hay. Here. Laura Schufelt.
Here.
Chair of Committee, Rick Presby.
Here.
You have quorum.
Well, I'm opening for public comment, and for those who haven't been here before, I generally, because we have so few people coming, I try to keep public comment open for the whole meeting so that you can make your contributions throughout the meeting once you're called upon. So thank you all for coming, and glad to have some people here, and hopefully you'll have something to help us with. Starting out, our goal is to come up with, the specific number is 3. We could do 4 ideas about what can be done in the town of Barnstable to solve the affordable housing problem. And so my thought is that we want to go through what the possibilities are, and we have probably 30 or 35 possibilities. But we will also want to choose something that actually will be done if we choose it. What's the point in choosing a wonderful idea that won't get done? There's just no point in it. So that cuts it way down, as you might guess. So this morning, or this afternoon, we're going to talk about some of those ideas and try to narrow them down to a few that we might have. But in the meantime, before we start that, I want to ask anybody here if they want to start out with a public comment.
Good afternoon, everybody. Paul Phelan, Town of Barnstable. I just want to take a moment of personal privilege, Mr. Chairman, wish my wife a happy birthday. She told me this morning she was sent here a month ahead of Jesus. The lights on. Oh, lights on now. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me repeat myself, please. I need to take a minute of personal privilege to wish my wife a happy birthday. She told me this morning she was sent here a month ahead of Jesus to check everything out. I can comprehend now why there were 40 people applied for this committee, and boy, did we get the cream of the crop. Watching every meeting, I can't thank you all enough, honestly. I just want to add something new. We volunteer with this group called Keep Barnstable Clean. And 2 weeks ago, we were assigned Lincoln Street to clean, pick up litter. And I noticed walking along, there are 3 empty or vacant buildings on Lincoln Street. You wouldn't notice it by driving by, but when you're walking by, you do notice these buildings. And in Precinct 6, where I am, I know of 3 empty buildings. There's one right next to me. Now, the gentleman pays his taxes and mows the lawn, but he hasn't lived there in 10 years. For the life of me, I can't understand why. These other buildings I know are vacant. I can't tell if the utilities are turned off, which it looks like to me, because they're and there's also legal things. You can't, if you go to any planning or zoning meetings, you can't force a homeowner, a landowner to do anything. However, I think there are tools we can use to help the housing, by encouraging people to either rehab them or to lease them or rent them. I know there are communities in the U.S. that do put a tax on vacant buildings. Now, that tax word is I understand the ramifications of that. You know, we were already hit pretty bad in the pocket. No one wants more taxes. But this is just one remedy. I can't for the life of me understand why we have empty buildings. And we don't keep track of that either. I don't think there's any town that I know of that keeps track of it. I think that's something I would like to see us look into. It's a difficult criteria. I understand if someone's paying taxes, you don't know if they're vacant, and they probably might not have any legal standing to do much about it. However, maybe some that aren't paying taxes or in arrears, we can do something about it. Moving on, I'd just like to say two more brief things. I don't for the life of me understand why we have property at the Marston Mills Village, I should say, that's been vacant for 10 years. And now we want to, instead of putting a senior housing in there, they're talking recreation. Now, I'm venting my own frustration here, just airing it out, not trying to put my ideas on anyone else. But I think we need to take care of seniors first. We have one counselor one town counselor. Back in April, he said, I'm yes for affordable housing in my backyard. Last month, he said, I'm all for recreation. I don't understand that in the least. It breaks my heart and it blows my mind, honest to God. Why? And I get the residents should be heard first. They need input. But are we one town? Or are we all divided? Is it up to Hyannis to fix this only? Everyone thinks it's okay to flood Hyannis with apartments. Come to Centerville too, I'd say. Lastly, folks, I'll repeat myself that airports are land hogs. We have 800 acres that I call the Cape Cod Ghost Airport. We need to do better. General Chris Foe came in here and spoke to our council and said, yes, we'll talk to you about merging, whatever wants to. He said, something needs to happen because we can't afford to run this airport. However, we're stuck. We have our feet in quicksand when it comes to do anything about that place. We have an opportunity here to do something else. The money they claim they bring in property taxes, $700,000, mainly from Hyannis Landing project, that could be quadrupled with housing and businesses. I appreciate everybody this opportunity from the bottom of my heart. This is great to talk to some of my peers here, and I appreciate it once again. Bye-bye.
Can I take the chair privilege and answer a comment? I shouldn't say answer. A couple of questions. One, on the first part, on the property that is not being used, that I spent, in my work, I'm retired now, I spent many years trying to buy two properties. Both of them were completely unused, and the owners didn't want to sell. And they didn't sell. Now, recently, one of them has been bought by a developer. But I think that that's not uncommon in real estate and in old cars as it is too, where people have something they never use, but they don't need the money, and so they wait forever. And for one reason or another, they all have their reasons. They just don't sell until somebody asks them 75 times, and then they do it. It's a little puzzling. On the Marston's Mills issue, the town has, I think I can say it this way, has done its best by having 4 meetings, 3 of them in Marston's Mills, about how that property is used. And what happens in those meetings, and I've been to all 4 of them, is that there are a few people in each of those meetings that speak loudly about no housing there because they have fears about what that means for them and their housing and their kids and everything else. I don't necessarily think I don't think the feelings are well-founded, given my experience. But that's what's happened. But no decision has been made. And ultimately, the town council makes a decision. So you get feedback from the town. We had a meeting here recently. We didn't get very many people here, and Martha's Mills is crowded. And we'll see what happens. I think my conclusion is that done correctly, and I'm not going to give any numbers or give away my own personal feelings, but is that a lot of people object to that kind of housing being created. But once it's created, if it's done with a thought towards the community and the location it's being put into, and a thought about the people who live there and what their fears are, if it's done well, then it's fine. Nobody cares. We've got several of those projects in the town of Barnstable now, and nobody even knows where they are. And so, one hopes that the public learns more and gets more sort of moderate about their feelings to allow the creation of an essential in people's lives, whether they're elderly or otherwise, for housing, because everyone desperately needs housing. If you need health care, you go to the hospital. If you need food, you go to a food pantry. If you need housing, you sleep on your friend's sofa. And it's a serious thing, and people, I don't think, really fully understand it. You do, and a lot of other people here do, but that's something we just have to work with. And what was your last point?
The Cape Cod Ghost Airport?
Oh, well, there is, I'm not part of it, but there is a discussion about that airport that's going on, and maybe 30 or 40 years from now, things will change. I don't think it's going to change overnight.
Thank you.
Thank you for this. Yeah.
Hello. First, I'll say thank you. Happy birthday to your wife. And the other, excuse me, it's talking about the airport. I like that. So maybe private citizens, we can start the ball rolling. Call whoever that person is you said. Try to get a committee going. Try to sit down. Okay? That's something we can at least try because I think it's a good idea. But now the other thing in Martha's Mills and on these committees, like you said, the one counselor who on one hand agreed, came back and didn't, that's because all these committees, the art of all of these committees and all of these towns is to keep having committees and don't do anything. His friends or someone who had money got mad at him and he or her, I don't know who it was, and changed their mind. And as far as Martha's Mills, it's the same thing. We're sitting on 100 committees in town waiting for them to do the right thing or waiting for the community. Communities, especially nowadays and around this area, when it comes to low income and people of color, they're never going to do the right thing. So the people who jump on these committees to say they're here for the people have got to take a stand. Because the majority of them, you see someone of color, point blank, they don't want no housing there. You see somebody poor, point blank, we don't want no housing here. Okay? But if you're going to sit there, a so-called town, to say you're here for the people when everybody, poor, people of color, and everyone else are paying taxes, okay, and you do nothing for them because the rich old folks or the good old folks who aren't people of color living in a certain town don't want those homes, you've got to take it upon yourself to stand up and do what you know is right. If not, remove yourself from the committee. And I'm going to do my best if I am given a notice. If I can ask somebody to give me a heads up, because half the time I don't read the paper because I can't see it. And I don't have a computer, so I don't always catch all the meetings. If I could get a heads up whenever there's a meeting in town, I can get people to those meetings. And I don't care if I'm standing here talking to 100 people. I'm going to say my piece because these committees who, we want to help. No, they don't. Some of these people that sit on these committees are the same people that live in these communities. And they don't want people around. And you know what? Too bad. Just too bad. Because there are laws in place. If somebody is not behaving or doing the right thing, get them out. There are laws for that. If there's anything negative that a person doesn't like. So what's your problem? You know, so please, if there's something, number one, with the airport, I will work with you to call someone, because that doesn't make sense. And everything else, believe me, your friend had friends that told him, what are you doing? Knock it off. So he knocked it off. But I ain't got time for that. Like I said before, I don't care who likes me. Thank you.
Any other comments from committee members? Nobody? Any other public comment? If you write down your name and tell us your name, it would be great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Gregory. I live in Centerville. I sent an email earlier this morning with an article that I hope maybe some of you had a chance to review. I wanted to come and talk to you today, stemming from a conversation I had.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
I think probably I've read it, and several of us probably have. I could ask for hands, but I'm still interested in you talking about this, but I wouldn't be at all sure that everybody has read it, given that most people are working and so forth.
I'm gonna
Thank you.
get into that. Thank you, though.
Yeah.
I understand it. It's short notice. It came from a conversation I had one-on-one with Charlie Bloom, who isn't able to be here today, but he understands that I'm here talking. We were having coffee at Bread and Rose, which is the coffee shop right across the street from the TD Bank that's going to have apartments built. And I know that he has feelings about the size and the height of that building. And he and I don't see eye to eye on that, and we shared our views on that. And one of the questions he asked me when we were talking was, these developers say they need 4 stories to make money in certain areas, and he didn't understand why that was the case. And my response was, well, when they say they need to make money in terms of a finance person. So they don't need to make bare profit. They need to make 12% hurdle rate over 5 years for the money they're spending here to be worth it for them. And that's why you have the larger developers building larger developments and saying they need to charge X amount and build X size. And that's just kind of the unfortunate byproduct of having to deal with private developers like that. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I also talked a little bit of my experience as a homeowner. In April 2020, I sold my house on Redwood Lane in Hyannis. It was not a great, should have waited a little bit longer, but we sold the house. And my wife and I had thought real hard about putting that property up for long-term rent. We never considered short-term, but we thought about long-term. And when it came down to it, the risk of owning one property and putting it up for rent was too high for us. My wife was pregnant with our first daughter, and we took serious the responsibility that if you're putting your house up for rent, you're not in a business relationship with that tenant. You're in a personal relationship with that person. And so cancer happens, someone gets laid off. You're not just, you can't just kick someone out, and you shouldn't just be able to kick someone out. But that means that if you only have one property to put up, you don't have the scale to manage the risk along with entering into that type of business. And so we're kind of circling, and I think that that's why so many people with one house go with the short-term route. And I honestly think that if we tried to make people, if we tried to regulate the short-term market, that the result wouldn't be them converting that into long-term rentals. The result would them being to put those houses on the market, because you can take that money, put it in a Vanguard account, and I think maybe make like 9% this year. It's from doing nothing. I'll show you later. So we were kind of circling all those different things that add up to why are these big developers the only people we can get to to build the housing we need. We can't trust them to necessarily follow the agreements that we agreed to originally. There are people putting up rentals for short term that they said they wouldn't later. We can't necessarily get them to keep the affordable units that they said they would put up. And I was doing some research and I came across that article about social housing. And it stems from, this isn't included in the article, it stems from Vienna's approach to housing, which is I think far more radical than anything America is ready to pursue. But they aggressively acquire property and then have not-for-profit developers bid to build apartment buildings in their city, to the extent that I think 3 out of 6 people in their town live in social housing. And that housing is priced to be affordable, but also to be self-sustaining and to be well-maintained. Montgomery County, it seems, found a slightly more capitalistic way of interacting with that idea, where they use their ability to raise funds with a municipal bond rate that's better than developers can get out on the open market. They're also looking to acquire property, and then they partner with developers to build buildings that they want. And at the end of that project, they refinance, they pay off that loan for that building, they take partial majority ownership of the property, and then they're able to dictate things like how many affordable units they have in that property, what rents they're going to charge. And it seems to me that this might be an idea that we want to consider in depth, because even if I know that the county commission is controversial with some people, but even if we don't have the money ourselves to do it, maybe that's something we could partner with the county to pursue. But it seems like a way that we could free ourselves from the financialization of the housing market, be a little bit more certain that the housing we're building is going to stay on the long-term market, and also provide housing in places where people work, so they don't necessarily need a car to drive to live. And there's a lot to it, but I just wanted to share that idea with you all. And I hope that you'll all read the article when you have a chance, if you haven't, because they get into the numbers a little bit better than I can articulate to you all.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming in and sending that to us and coming and talking about it. Both subjects that you talked about are ones that are of interest to us. One's a relatively new idea, and the other is something we've talked about quite a lot. That is the year-round issue as opposed to but we have at least one person here who has read this and knows a lot about it, and so I'm going to ask her to jump in here.
Hi, thanks for coming in and sending this. I will tell you that in the recently passed Affordable Homes Act, there is a pilot program for social housing, promoted mostly by a couple of reps in the Cambridge area. So it has the potential for funding, and certainly as a pilot program. It will be interesting to see the results of that pilot program, and then whether the state will make some changes to law or waivers to law that would allow it to happen. The public-private partnership in Massachusetts is difficult due to anti-corruption laws that were put into place in the early 70s. And so they're banking on this pilot program to see how it works. And in the pilot program, there's a third low income, a third middle income, and a third market. And that's how it's sustainable. It would be funded, originally the construction would be funded with state funds that would have to be refinanced or partially refinanced and partially spread out over time with very low income, very low interest. So just so you know, there is some progress being made, but it's going to be a wait and see in Massachusetts.
And is that only because if we wanted state funds to pursue something like that, we need to wait? Or is it also the public-private relationship that's the issue?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. It's also, that Maryland used not municipal, but housing authority bonds, which housing authorities can bond. It's just there is no, they have to have a dedicated repayment in order to move forward. So it's a little bit different, but mostly it's around looking at whether there can be a successful project that can do the third without, throwing millions of dollars towards it.
Thank you, Chris, for coming up and speaking to us. When you were talking about your decision to either sell that house or put it into rental, you were talking about the back and forth you had about the benefits and the risk. Can you explain more of that? What do you consider the benefits and the risks?
We never considered short-term renting. I felt from a principal standpoint that it needed to go on long-term. It was essentially like we're not rich people. We the idea of falling short. I think that we had such a low rate on that house. Oh my God, the falling short $1,200 1 month because someone couldn't make their rent payment made a difference. We didn't necessarily, when they say you're supposed to put your house up for rent, you're supposed to have this $10,000 saved up as an emergency fund. You'd have to put in some effort to build up that reserve. We certainly didn't have it. And so there was an idea of if we're going to responsibly do this, we're not in a position to do it right now. It was April of 2020, so we weren't sure what was going to happen week to week, let alone month to month. And we sold that house in May. If we had waited 3 more months, we would have made a lot more on it. But also when we were talking to people about how much we should rent the house for, when I heard the number of people were telling us to put it up for, it seemed unreasonable to me to ask of people. And I was a long-term renter in central Massachusetts for many years. When my wife was in grad school, I was making $32,000 a year at that point. I was the sole breadwinner. And, it was scary if the property tax got raised and rent went up $100, or, we didn't turn on our heat in the winter because, we were worried about how much it was going to cost. I understand that when you're renting, especially in really tough economic times, that those are things people are afraid of. And I wanted to really be thoughtful about what we were going to do with that property. And at the end of the day, we decided to sell it because we didn't think that we could manage the risk that was associated with that responsibility. If we had 5 houses, yeah, maybe we could mitigate that risk a little bit. If that house had a garage on it and I had some money lying around and I could turn it into like a 1-bedroom on the top floor and a 2-bedroom on the bottom floor and turn the garage into a suite and mitigate the risk that way, yeah, maybe that would have made sense if I was allowed to do it. But in the end, we didn't think that it was a smart investment for us, and we didn't think that we could become landlords responsibly in that situation. And at the same time, we still have regrets about selling that house. There are days where I really wish I could have held on to it. And then the lot across the street from it just got cleared. And that lot is listed for more than we sold the house for now. So it's the cost of living here just keeps on going up. And so I'm just really, interested in things that are going to cause a deflationary effect on rents and honestly on property value in this town, because in my mind right now, it's easier to build a mansion or a McMansion in this town than it is to build apartments. I've seen plenty of those go up. And, you know, people have a lot of sensibilities about what type of housing they like and what they don't. My sensibilities are turned off by those big houses.
One of the subject you've brought up is something we'll be discussing today, but it's also something that I've been talking to people about who own rental housing on this very subject, that is going from seasonal rentals to year-round rentals. And it's complicated like everything, but the thing that has to happen is, it seems to me, is you need to do the arithmetic for what you're going to get if you rent it in the summer. And then somebody, the state or the town or somebody, has to subsidize the difference. And therefore, you'd have money to put in your pocket to some extent to establish a reserve, you know, and that kind of thing. And I agree with you about the issue of, if you do one house, you've got a personal relationship with a person. And that can be, that's usually really a good thing. But if something bad happens, you're in a little trouble. But, and that's you're a very generous, caring person, so not everybody is. But your decision was based some on your sensitivity to the needs of others. You were doing it for that reason. You didn't do it for that reason. So anyway, I thank you for your comments. And if you stay around, we'll be talking more about it. Okay, Paula.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for coming in, Chris. You've brought some very astute observations about the housing market, financial risk factors that, you know, people have to consider if they're going to own and rent. And I totally agree that there's a lot more risk for a single renter, you know, one property versus spreading it, leveraging, you know, many. I just wanted to make a comment. You mentioned Vienna having a lot of the what we would call social housing, and other European cities also. Paris has a lot of housing and policies that really try to retain the folks that have lived there and who work there. And I sure wish we could inject some of that philosophy into our conversations in this country, but it's going to take a while. But I think it's good to get started on it. I think so much of how we associate real estate is the investment potential, and even for home ownership, it's become less a place to live than a wealth creation, and so that sometimes is in contrast to people just having an apartment that they know they can live in, that a landlord's not going to jack up the rent, and it's their place to live for as long as they want to live. I happen to have many decades ago visited relatives in Vienna, and there was a family that lived in an apartment, and it was more than adequate, and the rent was very reasonable. And if we could move in that direction at all, I would be more than supportive. So thank you for bringing these ideas to our attention.
I just want to add what everyone else is saying. Only a caring person would take the time to look into that, to think about it, and to bring it forward. So just thank you. And I hope whatever happens, you stay around to help be involved in it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple comments. One, first on the first speaker, on Paul's idea about the airport. I absolutely agree with that. And you have to take it in the context that 86% of the land on Cape Cod is already developed or in protected state. That leaves 14% left to work with, and of that, a lot of that's critical habitat, I think more than 50% of it. So that's when you have situations like the Marston's Mills property, I think it's very easy for people to get ramped up and get into situations where they might say or do things they might not normally say because the stakes are so high when you have just this one little piece of property. And I think it absolutely needs to be done. The town council has asked the Cape Cod Commission to do a regional transportation study. The Airport Commission has voted to support that study. And I would say that absolutely needs to be done. because the thought that with 86, so 14% left, that we have two absolutely enormous airfield complexes on Cape Cod, both underutilized, without doing due diligence to study a merging of them is unacceptable. So thank you, Paul, for keeping that forward. And then, Chris, I'm just curious, what is your background? What is your employment? I mean, I'm just really impressed with how studious, and you took the time to talk to Charlie Bloom and really explore some of this.
I'm a business systems analyst, which is a part business analyst, part system administrator for a not-for-profit called Ithaca, which runs educational resources for colleges and different learning institutions. Our main product is JSTOR, which is a journal archive that almost every humanities student uses in the world, honestly. I'm focused on our support ticketing system. I have a master's in information sciences from Worcester Polytech, but I mean, that's.
Yeah. But you must be working remotely, is that?
I've been working remotely since 2012, actually. The company is based in New York and Ann Arbor. So I am very lucky to be able to have the job I do, and I'm very, it's a wonderful
And you
place.
bought another home in Centerville?
It's complicated. We moved into a house that my wife's grandfather, Herb Cahoon, he was a house builder here for a long time. He built that house for his mother and then expanded it for his family when they took it over. And we could not afford to buy the entire house. We bought 25% of that house, and we take care of it for the family. And we're probably never going to own the entire property. It'd be too expensive. Our neighbor just listed their house at a much smaller lot, and they're asking almost $900,000 for it. So it's a little bit of a complicated situation, but you know we own part of a house.
Well, thank you. That's what people are doing here. I mean, you wouldn't be alone in saying you're in a unique situation trying to meet your housing needs. And I have great hope, maybe we can, as a town, we can exert some pressure on the state about this pilot program in Cambridge and try to move things a little faster, since we do have, Secretary Augustus now. If these things hold promise and can get some of the prices down, then why wouldn't we jump on that and accelerate that in any way we could? So thank you so much. Thank you.
Public comment, anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much.
One quick question. No, just stay there. I did look at the article. I didn't have a chance to read the whole thing, but I looked at it on my phone. Was your number and everything attached to that?
No, ma'am. Charlie has my number. I give him permission to give it to you if you'd like.
Well, if you can drop it off with Cindy or anybody, if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Just so we could, oh, and it's Mary Ann. Don't you man me. I'll come over there and get you. Don't, thank you.
On our agenda is the discussion of, the beginning of the discussion about the three possible best ideas that we want to give to the town council. And I'm obviously not expecting we're going to come up with those three today. And in fact, what?
Well, last meeting I did mention that I wanted to bring something up, so I hope we weren't ready to.
Okay, do you want to do that now?
Well, can I, if we're talking about getting ready to put things together to take to the council, but there was something that I mentioned the last meeting I wanted to bring up.
Well, let me finish my paragraph.
Sure, yes.
I thought one, wouldn't get to all the ideas today, and two, the ideas we do get to, I want to ask people as either as individuals or as pairs to study the idea until the next meeting and to write it up, because they all get a little complicated. And so we are not going to, in the next couple of meetings, make final decisions on, we might make it on one, I can think of one we could make a decision on, but I can't think of the others, so nothing's going to really happen today other than we're going to start to move towards a selection of some ideas to look into and do research about.
Well, okay, so I can bring up the idea that I had.
Yes, you can.
That's not part of this.
Go ahead.
It's a plan I had, okay. But I do want to comment on something. And I appreciate, I've worked with you before, and I appreciate your tough, get in there and do it. But I do worry sometime when, and I've been involved in many meetings, it's like you form a committee to form another committee to form another group. If you know a house has to go up across the street, you come to the table, who's got the money, who's putting it up, and you do it. I'm sorry. But anyway, what I have wanted to, I had gotten together with some people, and as I told you at last meeting, I spent the weekend with the homeless, talking, many people I know, some I don't. But I really involved myself because as no secret to nobody, I once was there. Now, there's an armory across the street, right over there. And if I'm not mistaken, it used to house soldiers or whatever, wasn't it? What was the armory for? Anyone know? Anyway, I don't care if it was just a big square building. It's sitting there. The town owns it. To fix that up for the homeless in our town, and I'm not just saying everybody jump on board. There's got to be some structure, and I had a whole plan written out, and I was hoping to have it to present it today, but the other person couldn't make it today. But I just want to put this out for a thought. This would be for people who are originally from the Cape. Because I do understand that, and I fight for everybody to have housing. But that particular thing over there, it'll be, the way it's going to be structured, it should be for the people who have been on the Cape forever, whether it be their families, they live here, The other is if you put showers, everybody that's homeless, I can say, come on, I'll do for you. No. You set them up in there for 3 months or 4, whatever the number we come to. Most homeless people need a bed, a closet, or just a cabinet, a locker to put their belongings, and a shower. You can have men on one side, women on the other. You have a nurse in the facility. You can pay for that. Town can pay for that. To make sure the medicines are given, and somebody there to help them get on their feet. 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with that. That building is sitting there. The town owns it. And the only reason they wouldn't want to do it is because people are going to be, it's not going to look good for the homeless across. I don't want to hear it. They have enough room, they can open the backyard to make it a sitting area. So their precious front could stay nice and empty. But people we got to stop this. Our image. No. People are dying in the street. And if they had that set up like that, giving people a chance to get on their feet, I guarantee you a lot of them would. Because half of the people, when you tell them, we have all these shelters around here. Yes, but by the time they have to get up, their biggest thought of the day is hanging on to their belongings. So they run around with their belongings. Everybody doesn't shower all the time. They don't, and the people that do want to help, they want cameras there so everyone can see it. People don't want that. And that was the number one discussion we had. And I understood it. I'll never forget, and everything I do, I talk about my own personal life because it's important to me. When my son was about 4, my oldest, they had helping people with the holidays. My friend and I went to go get help. She walked in, and I saw her coming out. And I said, what's the matter? As soon as I got to the door, I knew what was the matter. There was Channel 5, there was everybody. No, thank you. Keep your food. I'll go hungry. I'll give my child some chicken nuggets. People don't need that. If you want to feel good about yourself, go to church, put something in the plate. That's it. But I think I really hope that we can get together and maybe come up with some kind of strategy that is utilized. It just can't sit empty and rot away. People
So
can be warned.
can you wrap it up so we can talk about this?
I'm wrapped up. Go ahead, I'm done. You already know I'll talk. But I'm done.
I know that. Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, Marianne, and it's something I'd been, because you had talked, Rick, at some meetings ago. Who's our audience? You know, who are we trying to help? Or, you know, if you can categorize people into, you know, affordability components. But what about the homeless? And what you seem to be talking about, Marianne, is management. Is the shelter that exists in Hyannis not managed correctly? Is it a management issue? I mean, it's also a space issue, but I'm just curious that.
They have a bed and they have to be there a certain time. That's why you see people in line. They go to bed, they get to bed, they get up, get out.
But so you're talking a management issue. You're talking managing this in a different way.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I am, but it's not as hard as people make it. Everything we do, we make it sound so hard. The only thing different between what they're doing and what I'm asking to be done over here is they have a locker, they'll have a bed, so they don't have to line up at 4 o'clock afraid to get a bed. They'll have their bed. They have a place to put their belongings. When they get up in the morning, they can meet with the intake worker who's going to help them go look for a job. They have a place to take a shower. There's nothing hard about that. They have other places in the community that they have to walk to and meet with a social worker. There can be one on the facility. It's going to make things where there will be a turnover. People will get on their feet. Even if for me it's getting on their feet, I know I'm driving you crazy, Rick, but even when they get on their feet, they can move off the Cape. Who knows? Who knows? But give them a chance, a real one.
I'll just add one thing is that Portland, Maine just did something very similar to what you said. They built a homeless facility where they provide 3 meals a day. They provide some of the services and things that you talk about, and they put it outside of their city center. So it's kind of a campus-like area, if you will. And then if they need some of the services, they provide buses to come in. But I don't know if that's what our committee is looking at. I mean, the homeless are a piece of the equation.
Can
Can
I get in here? As most of you know, I ran a shelter for, 30 years or so, among other things, for individuals. It's still open. It's now called St. Joseph's. And obviously you have all the basic things you have to do, including having staff to do it. But what I have realized, especially in retirement, is that providing a place for people to stay and keep their stuff and all that is not enough. It's not enough. This is a situation where you have to really work with people so that they can believe in themselves and help them walk down the road to being healthy human beings, because a lot of them have suffered so much that they're not. And that is true with families and it's true with individuals. And not much of that goes on Cape Cod now. And I'm working actually quite hard with an organization on that very subject. That is that I used to think that when you put somebody into housing, that solved their biggest problem, and they were just going to fly away in happiness and be able to do it. It doesn't work that way. And so with your plan, it isn't worth doing unless you add this second ingredient. You know, now I'm not saying it isn't worth having a place for people to stay overnight. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying ultimately you'll fill it up, and there'll be a bunch more people here that don't get in, and they'll be up all night, out living in the woods all night. There has to be a way to help them really start their lives over and believe in themselves.
Well, your kindness is so that helping them believe in themselves, but there has to be a start. Now, since you have that program going on in your place,
I don't have it now.
well,
Oh, the other one,
in
yeah.
St. Joseph, you said. So the start will be getting people over here, then they can go there to get that, because there are a lot of people who will on their own. Because, see, that's part of the problem. Every solution, we can always find a problem to something, but I guarantee you, some of the people that will come over there and get out of the cold in the wintertime, not have to lug their stuff around,
Yeah.
who can get a shower, who can get a meal, and
Yeah.
even if they have someone downstairs to talk to, yeah, there's going to be rules and regulations, but we're not trying to make it a hospital, because that's what everyone wants to bring up. And so, which means we don't have to do nothing. No, we have to do some things. And I do understand that everybody, and there are some people that are really sick because we closed up all the mental hospitals where people need help. So we have to deal with that. But does that mean people go ahead and live in the woods until we get the money to do what we have
So
to do
can I
correctly?
jump in here? Because
Sure.
we've only got an hour left, and what I want to do is to accept that as the first thing we're going to talk about, and to assign you and somebody else you pick to have a discussion and do some research about this and come back with a more comprehensive, well thought. I'm not saying you're not well thought out, but there's details. There's endless details. There really are. I mean, I know the principle. I understand the principle. So if you would do that for our next meeting, then we can go take that suggestion to the next level. And one of the things we have to consider, as I said earlier, is whether the town council would do anything about it too, because and hopefully, that's something we have to evaluate. We have to agree that they'll do something rather than saying, oh, this is just another idea, forget it, okay?
I agree.
Okay.
And believe me, I'm not naive. I try to, as much as I talk, I try to put the topping out
Okay.
there. Being on the board of directors at Legal Services and other community things, believe me, I had to deal with a lot of things as well.
Okay.
So I
Good.
hear you.
So does anybody have another idea they want to bring up? I mean, I have one, but I don't want to do it when other people have it. Yes.
I think the elephant in the room is the Airbnb problem we have here, and having regulations that take the profit out of it for outside investors, and make those houses available again for year-round rentals.
Yep.
So I think that's something that's we have to regulate them in a certain respect, and like I say, take the profit motive out of having properties bought just by a corporation or by an individual who doesn't live here and just rents them out for the highest return.
In other words, to get units that are now seasonal and make them year-round.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different cities across the United States have done that throughout the world. You look at, a lot of these European cities their housing stock is being depleted, and the people who actually live there and work there are having to move out. One is Barcelona and other things. So people are up in arms about that, and they're making policies to restrict those rentals. And I think that's a better idea than us deciding to pay people not to rent. First thing, the amount of rent you can get in the average house renting Airbnb for a summer is far more than you get it for renting year-round. And so it's we would never be able to pay enough to people to get in that program. And I don't think we should be paying people. It's why would we put out money as a town, when we can just regulate them to a point where they're less of a problem. That's what I'm thinking.
On this subject, yes. Yeah. Did you want to say something? Oh, okay, sorry. I did some research on this, as I said, and one of the things I was surprised at, I'm talking about people that own 2 houses in Hyannis and live in Randolph, Massachusetts. These are real people. And so we had this conversation. In fact, he sent me an email with all the numbers during this meeting, so I haven't looked at. But the basic numbers were surprisingly not as different as I thought. And when I say that, it doesn't mean they're not different. So it could be done through reducing taxes on somebody, possibly, as opposed to spending money, you know. In other words, to tax them less if they're running year-round than if they're just doing it seasonally. I mean, you could tax them more to do it seasonally, you probably already do.
Yeah, but that puts the burden on the other homeowners to make up for that. People have their own homes, and they'll be subsidizing people to rent it short term.
Sure.
And I don't think we should be subsidizing that. First thing, businesses aren't allowed in residential areas, and that's what's happening. So I don't think we should spend a dime on this. I think we should regulate them to a point where it's no longer a valid investment or has a return on investment. But we have traditions in this on the Cape where people will move, you know, and even in Australia, the guys, people on the water, they move into somebody else's house for a month, sleep on somebody's couch, and they pay their property taxes by doing that. So I don't think we should be rewarding people and also giving them subsidies from the other taxpayers by doing that Airbnb, because it is basically not allowed in a residential area.
So you're going to write this up, perhaps with a partner for the next meeting? You're going to do some research?
Yes.
And so forth. Thank you.
Yes, I will.
Yes.
Yeah, I second John's recommendation. I think some years ago, there was an attempt to do some regulatory structure for short-term rentals, and it was put aside. I think you could look, John, for some examples at Nantucket. They've tried several times. They've done very studious work. They have a town meeting, and the town meeting voted it down. But we might have a different result with the town council government. But I think it's a worthwhile thing that definitely falls within the bailiwick of the town council. And it's to say it's something that was put aside, that it's time to take a second look. And you have some, as I say, some good legwork in Nantucket that we could draw from.
I happen to agree with that, Betty, and I'm sure the first argument will be, well, now we're making so much money off the Airbnb taxes that they tax somewhere around 17 or 18%, that's going into other services like wastewater and everything else. But then you've got to look at the cost of us now having to address a lot of more of the housing problem because of that, where anybody who does their numbers on these things, whether they live, doesn't matter where they live, it is such an income-generating thing for the 3 or 4 months during the summer. You got to be crazy not to do it as a landlord. So I think that's something that we can regulate to a point where it's no longer the way to go, and those become back to being year-round rentals. I think that's exacerbated our problems.
Yeah, I'd like to volunteer to propose that the town look at recommending a transfer tax on real estate to generate revenue for housing. And if Councilor Starr would join me in that effort, we would come back with a proposal.
So
You're talking about-
I agree. Thank you.
You're talking
I think
about
it's-
the
I think
concept that's being talked about.
It's an idea we really need to look at just to raise some more money so we can start to buy some of these pieces of land. But we'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I would recommend that we support looking at town-owned land, town assets for affordable housing. And, you know, there's certainly examples that we've talked about here, including the Marston's Mills, the former school property, and any municipally owned land that's not already in restriction, in a conservation restriction, should be investigated, not just for large parcels of land, but places where we could do 3 or 4 units at a time. That would be my recommendation, one recommendation I have. Sure.
Laura, I'll work with you on that.
What? Oh. Well, I'll bring up the one that I mentioned at the town council meeting the other night, if anybody was listening, and that is, as most of us, I think, realize, the town does not enforce affordability from units that have already been built, whether they're sales or whether they're rentals. And losing units that were affordable is pretty bad when you're in the situation we're in. So that I think we ought to have a full-time housing staff person that does various dimensions in housing, but including researches and provides the information for enforcement of people not getting away with ignoring the requirements they agreed to when they got permission to build the development. It makes absolutely no sense. And I've done a little research on that too, and I think it's very doable, but for whatever reason, the town has not done it. And I have my own theories as why that might be, but it makes absolutely no sense.
One thing I'd also like to mention as an idea is we were talking about the inclusionary percentage on each development that was made that was affordable housing. We have, I believe it's 20% now, or is it less, depending on the...
You mean what the requirement?
What the requirement, 10%, but maybe increasing that.
6.78% affordable.
Yes, and maybe increasing that inclusionary percentage would be a good idea, if that's economically feasible.
Well, go ahead.
I agree that the inclusionary ordinance needs to be reviewed and an economic financial assessment finished so that we can see where that level should be. Right now it's at 10%, at 65% of area median income. And maybe there's ways to vary the number depending on the number of units, whatever, look at the whole picture. But also a distinction that Barnstable's ordinance has is that it's a general ordinance versus a zoning ordinance. And most of these inclusionary ordinances or bylaws are zoning, and therefore they can be enforced by the zoning enforcement officer. We don't have that, and we should, in my opinion. So making it a zoning ordinance, back it up with a economic financial assessment so that we know what can be afforded. Back it up with some density bonuses to bypass some of the recent legal challenges to inclusionary. And I think we could have a strong inclusionary that we could then also supplement with trust fund money to write down more units if we so choose, beyond what has to be done. So that would be my recommendation.
Yes.
Did you use the term density bonuses? I don't know what that is.
That means that in exchange for doing more affordable units than the minimum, you get to build more units, which is, what was being done on parts of Hyannis before the zoning change.
So, go ahead.
I'd also like to offer up that since we're throwing out goals, one of the things that I heard in several meetings at public comment was having some flexibility with our zoning in certain parts of our town. And right within our housing production plan, there is a strategy to identify zoning amendments and other strategies to support missing middle and living little forms of housing, such as allowing single-family home conversions, duplexes, cottage clusters, townhouses, tiny homes, and infill design consistent with locations identified as suitable in the local comprehensive plan. And since our LCPC process is very well underway, I think that this would be a really good opportunity for us to be looking at or recommending that the town council and however it delegates that appropriate zoning amendments so that we can move forward with some of these smaller density solutions to our housing issues.
I would pick up on yours and say that, and some people wouldn't believe I'm going to say this, every developer ought to be required to provide housing that's affordable, but to one or more categories of the 30%, 60%, up to 100%, because now, even at 100%, people sometimes can't afford it, what they're talking about. And we have to make this work for homeownership and rental as well, if we're going to do both. But I think it makes no sense that developers are doing some stuff with 3 units or 9 units or 10 units or 10% of the units when you have 40B wanting 20%, and so we fall behind every time there's a development. It makes no sense. And particularly since, if you go back to the beginning of this, if you call it 1969 when 40B was passed, it's gotten much worse because incomes have not gone up as fast as housing costs. Therefore, the problem we had 55 years ago is much worse now, and it seems overwhelming to me, honestly. And so we have to do things to require people to respond to it. And I think that requiring developers to do it, I developed a lot of projects, and they were all 100% affordable. And I don't know why nobody else except me can do that. But, I do know why. But there are real possibilities as to how to make this work. It's just that there has to be an acceptance of the idea. And I think that brings up another suggestion, and my suggestion fits in with yours, is we have to get the council to market, to be salespeople for the need for housing for people who can't afford housing. In other words, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no disadvantage to it. It's that it has to be done in a society like ours, and somebody has to make sure people, the general public, realize and understand the details of how it all works and why it's a good thing and why nothing bad comes out of it, because it doesn't. I've done lots of developments, and believe me, we don't get complaints about any of them. We get the complaints before we build it, but not after you build it, because people are carefully selected and the management enforces things and stuff. So they're decent, honorable people who just need a little less expensive costs in their lives because they don't have a lot of money. And, that's just a fact of life. Not everybody's going to have a lot of money. There's been a cartoon lately about rich people don't make enough money and poor people are making too much. And, it's funny, but it's true. And so we need to market, and we don't market as a town. Towns don't do that, but our whole society is based on marketing. Everything is on marketing, but the town doesn't do it. And you go and you listen to people say how terrible it is to create housing for people who are dependent on some subsidy of some sort, and they're human beings. They're people like us. They're people like all of us. And if you look at their backgrounds, they've done their best. They may be doing a fabulous job, but not paid well. They may be raising kids and doing a great job, but they need help. Yes.
I will say, as for Paula's idea, I think that's one of the Cape Cod Commission ideas that has very little public support about changing zoning in villages by right. And I think that's going to be, somebody's going to be a non-starter at the council. I don't know for sure, but I've heard from my constituents.
My hearing isn't very good. Did you say it's a non-starter?
I think it will be a very tough sell, because I think a lot of villages do not want their character of their villages changed wholesale by changes in zoning.
Well, the only thing I do to respond to that comment is that's not really part of today's discussion. What I'm saying is that Paul is going to come back. Yeah. She's going to do some research and do a written thing like the rest of us, and come back, and then we have those discussions. And I'm not saying you're not right. I'm just saying I don't want to start talking about why all the ideas are bad now, or I just want to get the ideas on the table and gets us doing some work to complete the thinking process with all of these things. That's all.
It also was an idea that was presented to us by Eric Schwab in one of our October meetings.
Yeah. Well, in the town plan, there's about 35 things, so we've got 10 now that we've brought up today. Not that we have to do it all today, but
I'm not going to go on the speaker, but I have to agree, zoning is something that has to be dealt with. Has to be. So I know it's not up for discussion.
you got to have your speaker on, though, that's a
Oh, sorry,
requirement.
well, nobody was really here. Sorry. I was just going to say, I know we're not discussing it right now, but zoning is something that has to be discussed. So, I mean, when we say it's a non-starter, oh, I so disagree with that, because we'll make it a starter. If they don't want to hear it, we'll fight till it is, because zoning is, it has to be. They created zoning to keep people out, to do certain things. People aren't foolish. That's exactly what zoning was put into place for. So, anyway, I'm sorry.
Zoning was a way to establish where certain things would go in what towns, whether they're industrial sites or they're residential sites, they're sites that have multi-uses. It was done to have, so we don't have the zoning we had when I lived in Houston, Texas, where there wasn't any zoning. Okay, and I understand what you're saying. Okay, but anybody can buy anywhere at this point in time that they want to. Okay, it's whether they're obviously it's whether they have the means to do it, but that's not what he's being disincluded.
No,
in that
I
respect.
agree. I hear what you're
Yeah.
saying 100%.
Yeah.
But if I have to back it up with the zoning, North Street, where all these little nice businesses are that you can't even afford to go into, used to have houses. I lived in one of those houses as a kid. They were houses all on North Street. A lot of that area was housing. Now the majority, it's a business district on certain areas. They need to stop. You know, because if you go to put a house, oh no, that's zone. No. So things are created. So I understand what you're saying. It depends on the town.
There's another thing I had. Just give me.
So I'm going to pop in with a couple more ideas because I did some preparation. How about increasing the required percentage of CPA funds to housing rather than the other things that CPA, Community Preservation Act funds can be used for? Any thoughts about that? No, you look skeptical.
I'm fine to consider it.
One thing I was thinking about is, can each of us or there be some group that would identify properties that are already existing, that are taken by tax lien over the years, that already have the imprimatur of the housing authority on them or some other housing development or agency? Like, for example, in my village, there's a couple of properties that have been taken by that means, but for 30 years have been like that. They've never been developed. So the question is, maybe we can look at those
I mean, unbuilt properties?
unbuilt properties that are, I think they're owned by the housing authority or the housing.
Well, there was a very well-known property in Osterville that was Housing Authority owned, but that was shut down for development.
That wasn't
There's
housing
one-
authority. That was the Darby property. It wasn't housing
Yeah, well,
authority.
the Housing Authority did have an interest in
There
that.
is one in Marston's Mills, and I'm not talking about the
Yeah.
former school property.
No, I'm talking about other properties that are in villages that are that size.
Yes, there is one right in Osterville that we are, there's several of us that are getting ready to fight. Actually, the town. Didn't want to get with personal business, but it was taken from my family. They claimed for taxes. And I put it out there. I don't, why tiptoe around things? And because my father just passed, because they wouldn't let no one deal with it. But none of us were notified until they took it. Nobody. And him 97? Are you kidding me? So yeah, so there's plenty of property that people take under the table and then they want to give it. I guarantee you some builder probably has got his fingers on it or somebody trying to get rich off of it. But No. You asked a question.
No, I don't know about
And
that
I'm telling
property.
you.
I understand.
Oh,
I don't
no.
know about that particular property, but I understand there's a couple of properties that are owned by the Housing Authority right now that were taken for, maybe that's one of them. That should be looked into being built for, small projects.
I want to say to all of you, please forgive me, because a lot of things that I do, when I get involved in a lot of these committees, the reason why I want to get involved, because I've always believed that if you're going to put yourself out there to help somebody, you have had to share some of their experiences. And I know there's always a lot of eye rolling or face looking or comments to each other, and I really don't care about that. But it's very hard to tell somebody how to help a person who's starving if you've never been hungry. If your biggest problem is what wine you're going to have with the fish, then you've never been there until you start looking under cushions for a quarter to help get a loaf of bread. You don't know what it's like. And sometimes people say, oh, you really talk. No, it's important for me to talk like this because people don't understand. Rick said something that floored me, and I think you're one of the nicest people. And I think you are one of the most caring people. But when you were saying how even with the homeless, we've got to work with them and spend money to help them, half of them don't believe in who they are. None of them ever are. As long as you have a community that tells you you're nothing, then, no, please hear me. Then how in the world, and it's the same thing with race. When you're growing up, everyone says, oh, such low self-esteem. No. When you have a community or a town, the state, the country in which you live, tells you you're second class, I mean, I really don't care if they tell you, but when they start acting it out, and it's backed up by, it's enforced by law, not on the books, but law under the table. So what I'm saying to you is, although I appreciate help is needed for people like that, but other than people who have a mental condition, half of those people, when you do give them that security, you're going to see they know how to stand up on their own.
Well, let me just very quickly tell you my history on that subject. I first realized that I used to teach a class at our Hacks Family Shelter in Falmouth, and there were about 9 women there, each with babies. And I was so impressed with a lot of those women because they seemed smart and everything, and so I thought, oh, this is easy, and so all I have to do is teach a good class and help people go along. But then after getting to know them, I realized their parents had never told them they did anything right. As a parent, I mean, I have 4 kids. I know that you sometimes have to tell a kid that he's doing something well, even something you're not crazy about them doing, like playing video games. You have to give him the idea that some of his things he likes to do well. If you never tell a kid that really hurts their future. And so now I'm on the board of an organization, I'm not going to name it, where it's for individuals, and they're wondering why the individuals, even when they're offered housing, lots of times they don't take it, they stay there, and they've been there some of them have been there 12 years in this place that they're supposed to move in and out of. And there's somebody who teaches classes, but there's not enough money to teach enough classes. It's like once a month for each of several different buildings, about 50 people. And so I've been meeting with them and the guy who runs it to talk about how we can essentially do more for the people's mental health and belief in themselves so that they can get out and move to another place and be successful, that's all. It isn't a judgment thing. It's something to help them get more able to do it. It's like training to be an athlete. It's like training anything. You have to train your mind to believe in yourself. You have to be a liberal arts person and learn that. You have to be an engineering student and learn that. And you have to learn things about life. I think I'm even more warm and generous to think this way than even less so, actually.
Oh, no, it's not.
So anyway, it's, and there's some of it going on in the United States, because, I've been doing some research about organizations doing it, and how well they do it, that's the other question, but they do have the right idea. But I don't remember, it never happened at HAC, honestly. I mean, with all the staff we had and all the money we spent, we never did this. I mean, I taught a class, but it wasn't on this subject. It was how to go out and find housing and, this and that and the other thing, So, I wish it wasn't true, but I think it is significantly a factor.
Yes, but, okay, I think we were talking about two different things. You were saying a place to help you find housing and all of that. Part of what I was saying.
Well, of
about
course,
the-
as you find, housing is, the elements.
But I'm saying there will be a counselor on, we're getting off the subject, and I can see we need to move back to business, but on this facility, there will be a social worker, someone there to. Oh, I am so sorry. I'm sorry.
Just leave it on.
Okay, no, you don't want that. I'll keep talking. But, yes, there will be a guidance counselor or somebody there to help people walk through certain steps. I'm talking about the one area, and it doesn't apply to everybody. There's always going to be people, no matter what, who are going to fall short with themselves, okay? But if you give the average person that's out there struggling, give them a place to, this is just the wrong time. I just wanted to address
Okay.
that. I don't want to hold everyone up. But I'll go further when I'm talking about
Okay.
at the next meeting.
How about increasing affordable units in existing properties? Is that a possibility?
Isn't that what we're talking about, inclusionary, but this is already existing? Sorry, this is already existing.
Existing properties that don't have affordable units. Just a thought.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it.
It can be done, but it takes, basically, it's just a number crunching, and it takes money. The trust has money.
But is that, if we had a full-time housing person here, if we did, would that person ever do that?
Crunch the numbers and,
Will work with people who have existing housing that don't have affordable units?
if that was their charge.
Well, I mean,
I'm just saying, if that was their charge, then yes, right now, we don't have anyone to negotiate
oh, yeah,
doing that.
yeah.
And so we would need to know we would need to have someone who understood it and had a formula, and then you have to have a willing landlord.
Yeah.
But that you can.
Is it
you
worth
know,
putting this on our list, or is it not worth it?
I think it's all part of the inclusionary question, because if you do the analysis for what can be afforded, you can do the present value to figure out how much is profitable.
But there's a lot of existing units out there, and so you can get right at it, as opposed to waiting for something to be built or getting an agreement with a builder.
Well, I think that there are certainly newly constructed and future to be constructed in the works that could be negotiated to have more affordable than what's in them now, so that they're not adding a cost. Because besides it being a cost to take less rent, there's also the cost of having to do a lottery and monitoring and agreements. So the easiest way to do it is to take what's already going to be having a lottery and up the percentage and give them some money to do it.
Yeah.
I have this is not for now because it's a little early. If there was a resolution to the Seasonal Communities Commission, the commission hasn't met yet, but when it does, Barnstable is not automatically designated, and so there will be a chance for the council to request to be designated, and I think the council should review what the pros and cons of doing that.
You don't want that on this list.
I don't really, if it happened before this list goes in, I would want to weigh in on whether we should do it or not, or have the committee. So I just want it to be a wait and see if something comes out and we have the opportunity to weigh in. I think we should.
The other night, the council extended the deadline of these committees. When they extended to the beginning of March, was it? March 31st, end of March. So we don't need to take that long, but it's more than we'd originally expected. Other thoughts? More thoughts? Yeah.
I'll keep going. And I think that that the planning, that we should recommend that the planning department investigate using the community development block grant money, CDBG, for a homeowner rehab program, and establish that in our next admin plan.
Yep. Keep going. You got more? Anybody got more?
Laura, what she's asking is homeowner who are currently renting to help them rehab their properties, or what does that mean?
No, it's for low-income homeowners to do code repairs like roofs and septic and others. There's a great need for it, especially for seniors that.
So CDBG money for home repairs.
CDBG for home repairs. Yep.
Bless you. Well, since we're not going to talk about anything on this packet until next meeting, I do have some thoughts on some things that were said, if I can put it out there. Oh, just for a minute, Rick gave us
Let me just ask,
he gave a look.
are we done with ideas?
I think we've accumulated about 10.
Yeah, I've got 14, but it may be some that,
I thought we had more than.
Unfortunately, I feel like the more meetings we have, the longer the list grows instead of going in the other direction. So I would caution that we add any more at this point in time, and that some of
Yeah.
these might actually be merged.
this
if
was
they're-
supposed to be the end of the list. Now, if somebody comes up with a brilliant idea that'll solve the whole thing, please bring it forward. But in other words, from this, we move on to figuring out which of these really make sense and which of these could actually happen. Those are in the future, not necessarily today. Does that make sense? You can say what you're thinking. I mean, what?
No, I think we should move on to approving the minutes of the meeting of last.
Oh, yeah.
So you want to end the meeting?
I don't believe that adding to this list is very productive at this point in time, and that if some of the
Okay.
ideas that have been generated will be presented at our next meeting could always be amended if something else needs to be included.
That's a suggestion.
I happen to agree we have quite a long list. I happen to agree we have quite a long
Okay,
list now,
yeah.
and that adjudicating all these, what we have forward, is going to take us quite a while.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think the major points, I think everybody thinks we have them out there.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Because by the time we get going with by the time we're trying to break these down, it's going to be forever.
So
So we
is
don't
there,
want too
is
many,
there a
you know.
motion to approve the minutes of the October 28th meeting?
So moved.
I'd like to just make a friendly amendment.
There's an amendment,
No, there's
sorry.
a Scrivener error on the 6 list of suggestions that we made at our last meeting. At number 6 says hire staff to prioritize. It should be hire as in HIRE instead of hire. So
That's very good.
small little detail to
Okay.
just correct the minutes.
Is there a second? All those in favor, say yes. Okay,
Yes.
raise your hand. Okay,
What about Gordon? Because Gordon is on Zoom. Oh. Don't you have to do a roll call?
Yes, you're right. We also have to schedule a next meeting, which I'm not sure we can do without Cynthia here.
Did she leave early, or is she in her office?
No, she left.
Well, you can do the roll call.
Yeah, we can do the roll call. What? Okay, all those in favor of
Accepting the minutes?
approving the meeting minutes?
Just say my name, just say Paul. Yes.
You have to say our name.
Yeah,
You have to say my name.
yeah. Yeah, Laura.
Yes.
Yeah.
John Crow, yes.
Yeah.
Betty Ludke, yes.
Hilda Hay, yes.
Mary Ann Barboza, yes.
Rick Presbury, yes.
Gordon Starr, yes.
Gordon, did you say yes?
He did.
Yes.
Okay, thank you,
Yes.
Gordon. Meeting adjourned.
No,
I
that
think
was
you
the
need to
minutes.
schedule the next meeting.
Well, I don't
Well,
know
we
if we
can
can.
schedule without Marianne telling us what she has available.
I would imagine that this time slot
You want
is
to do 2 weeks from
available,
today?
and that we could put out a suggestion. December 16th at this time,
Okay,
with our previous meetings.
That sounds reasonable.
so today's, my phone is a little slow being turned on, but I'm looking at the date. You have the date in front of you?
December 16th is December 16th is a Monday.
Okay.
I will be away that day.
Oh, you're not going to be here.
I'm sure the majority probably.
Okay. So the next meeting is December 16th. I will tell her or ask her.
Unless there's some issue with
Okay. Yeah, she'll take care of it if there is. Okay, thank you, everybody.
I'll move to adjourn.
Yep.
I'll second.
Second.
All those in favor? Do we have a roll?
Paula
have
Schnapp,
a
aye.
Roll call.
Laura Schufelt, aye.
John Crow, aye.
Rick Presby, aye.
Betty Ludke, yes.
Hilda Hay, yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Okay.